Hello again. Going to do another chapter this evening, chapter 7 of Freddy the Politician. I had to get right into it because I can see that these woodpeckers, they got something up their sleeves. So how's this selection going to go? All right, chapter 7. Let's get into it. There wasn't much work done on the bean farm that afternoon, though there was a good deal of activity. Animals hurried back and forth across the barnyard and gathered in groups to talk and argue, and there was even one or two fights among the rougher element down by the creek on the edge of the woods, the water rats and the weasels. Freddy was a little worried when he learned that the bank had closed early and that the 3 woodpeckers were making a nest-to-nest canvas of all the birds on the farm. Fine way to run our bank, he said to himself. And then he was even more worried when he met old Simon, the rat, and his son Ezra coming round the corner of the barn. For the rats had not been in the barnyard for over 2 years, not since the famous trial for murder in which Freddy had so ably defended Jinx against the false charge made by the rats of having killed and eaten a crow. Simon grinned wickedly at the pig. "Ah, my clever friend," he said. "Still a trifle overweight, are you not?" "You'd better not let Jinx see you, Simon," said Freddy, "or you'll lose more weight than you can afford to. What are you doing here, anyway? You're not supposed to come up near the barn." "As a free citizen of this new republic of yours, I am exercising my rights," said the rat. "I presume you won't deny us our votes." "No," said Freddy. "No, though I'd like to." And he hurried off to find Jinx. He found him in the cow barn, where Mrs. Wiggins, surrounded by a group of admiring friends, was exhibiting a flag which she had designed for the new republic. And I can show you that flag. Here we go. There you go. That's Mrs. Wiggins. With a pair of old blue overalls and an old white nightshirt and some old red flannel underwear of Mr. Bean's, which Georgie had begged for her from Mrs. Bean, she had laid out the flag, and then Adoniram had stitched it up for her on the new sewing machine. It was a good deal like the American flag, with 2 stars for Mr. and Mrs. Bean and 13 stripes for the 13 original animals who had taken that famous first trip to Florida. There was also a number of buttonholes scattered about, which didn't stand for anything except that they hadn't been able to avoid them in cutting out the cloth. I have to laugh every time I look at those buttonholes, says Mrs. Wiggins. What Mr. Bean will say when he sees his cast-off underwear flung to the breeze, I'm sure I do not know. He'll be very proud and very happy, said Robert. I was going to have Adoniram cut a couple of blue beans instead of stars, but it did seem to me as if beans would be sort of funny on a flag. You can't imagine going into battle under a flag with beans on it. Personally, I can't imagine going into battle under any kind of flag, said Freddy, but I'm not very warlike. Anyway, I think it was very clever of you. I don't see how you even ever thought of it. I don't know how anyone could help thinking of it, said Mrs. Wiggins. A country without a flag is as silly as well, I can't think of anything it's as silly as a pig without a tail, I guess. She laughed her deep, comfortable laugh. And as far as being clever goes, well, you know what they say about me. They say, that Mrs. Wiggins, she's got a heart of gold. You notice they don't ever say anything about my head. Still, when you all say I'm clever, it wouldn't be polite to contradict you. But what's on your mind, Freddy? I can always tell when something is worrying you by the way you keep grunting. I wasn't grunting, said Freddy. I may have sighed once or twice. Sounded like a grunt to me, said Mrs. Wiggins. But as I say, I'm not clever. Well, okay, out with it. I just met Simon and Ezra out there, said Freddy. And if you ask me, they're up to something. What? Said Jinx, jumping up. You mean they dared to come into the barnyard? Why, wait till I get my paws on that old sneak thief. I'll... Hold on, said Freddy. You can't do that. I mean, not until after the election, at least. As long as he behaves himself, every animal that lives on this farm has a right to be at this meeting tonight and to vote at the election. And as far as we know, the rats have been behaving themselves for the last 2 years. But here's what's worrying me. We're the old crowd, the animals here in the cow barn now. And as long as we stick together, we won't have any trouble in electing the president we want and running the things the way Mr. Bean wants them run. But there are a lot of animals living on this farm that we don't ever have much to do with. Field mice and woodchucks, squirrels, chipmunks, and the birds. I dare say there are hundreds of birds, and they all have votes. A good many of them will vote as we want to. The squirrels will be with us, and I think we can guarantee the rabbit vote. I've employed a good many of them at one time or another in my detective work, and I've looked after their affairs for them. But what I want to point out is that we've got to stick together. If we don't, 12 or 15 rats, all working together, can upset all our plans. And how would you like it if Simon was our president? The animals looked pretty scared, and Mrs. Wogus said, Freddy, you don't mean there's a chance of that? Not if we stick together, Freddy repeated. And of course, if he did get elected, we'd all get together and throw him out. But that's a revolution, and we don't want a revolution on this farm. Hey, how about the bugs? Asked Hank, the old white horse. Seems to me if you're going to be so fair to rats, you ought to be fair to bugs, too. Ain't a bug got any rights on this farm? It's kind of funny to hear you standing up for bugs, Hank, said Mrs. Wiggins, remembering how you pestered the life out of Mr. Bean until he bought some fly poison for the barn, so you could take naps in the afternoon. Flies ain't bugs, are they? Said Hank. They're pests. Still, I don't know, maybe you're right. You got to draw the line somewhere. We can't give bugs the vote, said Robert. Ants and beetles and butterflies, and why, there's millions of them. It would take 5 years to count the votes. Yes, and suppose they all stuck together and voted alike, said Emma. Dear me, suppose we had one of those dreadful centipedes for president. That's so, said Freddy. Bugs are out. Besides, this isn't a bug republic. It's a government of animals, by animals, and for animals. And birds, of course, he added with a nod to Charles. And birds, said Charles bitterly. And birds? Why not for birds and animals? I should like to know. Why not? No oration, Charles, please, said Freddy. When we say animals, we mean birds. And anyway, Charles, you're not really a bird. You can't fly. Oh, is that so? Shouted the rooster. And you can, I suppose? Like you did this morning, hey? Can't fly. I suppose you don't remember that time down in the Everglades when I saved all your lives by flying. I suppose... Of course we remember it, said Freddy. What I mean is that your normal mode of progression, or shall we say locomotion, is by walking. Come again, said Charles, who, although he used a great many long words in his speeches, seldom knew what they meant, and was wondering if perhaps he oughtn't to get still madder. Oh, just skip it, said Freddy. I'm only saying that if you want to go anywhere, you walk. You don't fly. I'm surprised at you, Charles. I've just explained that we all must stand together, and right away you start now about an unimportant thing like that. Charles subsided, grumbling in his beak, and Mrs. Wiggins said, I agree with you about the bugs, but what about Webb? That's right, said Hank. The Webbs went to Florida. There's stripes for them in that flag. But spiders ain't bugs, are they? Or ain't they? "They're bugs all right, as far as I know," said Freddie, "but Mr. Webb is a very distinguished bug, and Mrs. Webb is a very charming one. They've certainly got as good a right to vote as anyone on the farm. Now that is a problem." When Mr. Webb heard his name, he came swinging down his little silk ladder from the roof and landed on Mrs. Wiggins' nose. The cow sniffed and began puckering up her face for a sneeze. "Hey, what in tarnation!" she gasped. "Oh, it's you, Webb. Hang on. Hang on." And she gave a tremendous sneeze. "Are you there? All right, all right. Quit clawing me or I'll sneeze again. Get up on my ear." So Mr. Webb went up close to her ear, and the other animals waited while he talked. "It's all right," said Mrs. Wiggins after a minute. "Webb says he and Mrs. Webb don't care about voting. Says he's a bug and proud of it, but he knows it might cause us trouble. And he's sure it would cause him trouble, what with the other bugs being jealous and all. Now isn't that Webb all over?" The animals all said it was fine of him and gave him a cheer, and Mr. Webb ran up to the tip of Mrs. Wiggins' left horn and jumped up and down, which was a spider's way of showing good feeling. Here, by the way, is a little picture of some of the animals gathered. "Now," said Freddie, "who shall we nominate for president?" Immediately, all the animals began speaking at once. "I nominate Robert." "Jinx is my choice." Freddie for president." "Our Uncle Wesley always said," quacked Alice, "that he believed I had great executive ability, if only I had a chance to use it. Now I think—" "I assure you, ladies and gentlemen," interrupted Charles, "that if this high honor should fall to me—" "Quiet!" squealed Freddie. "Quiet! Silence! Shut up! Don't you see what's going to happen? Jinx is going to vote for Jinx, and Charles for Charles, and Alice for Alice, and so on. We'll all get from 1 to 3 or 4 votes apiece, and the rats will vote in a body for Simon and elect him. We've got to agree. Now, I don't say that Alice or Jinx or Charles or anyone here would make a bad president. I don't think there's any one of the old crowd that wouldn't do a good job. But we can't all be elected. We've got to agree on one. And I want to say right here that I am not a candidate. For one thing, I don't like to get up early in the morning. And believe me, the president of this farm has got to get up early and stay up late. Now, is there anybody else who doesn't want the job?" "Well, I don't, for one," said Henrietta. "Haven't I got enough to do with 27 children and a husband to manage and pick up after without taking on a whole farm? And Charles doesn't want it either." "Oh, come, Henrietta," protested the rooster. "If a wide popular demand should be made for my services, would I in all decency refuse? To the clarion call of public duty, the private citizen must respond, no matter how great the sacrifice. And who am I to say that—" "Stuff and nonsense," interrupted Henrietta vigorously. "The wide popular demand is usually for you to shut up, and you can respond to that right now." And she glared at him so ferociously that Charles sighed and leaned his head against the wall and fell into a reverie. "I guess there wouldn't be any wide popular demand for me either," said Hank. "There's some days I think I'd like to be a king or president or something, and lead parades and have the people throw their hats up and cheer when I went to the window. And there's some days I'm glad I'm just Hank, that nobody pays any attention to me, and I look out the window and there ain't anybody there looking back at me. And there's other days when I get the rheumatism in my off hind leg and it just kind of hurts me even to smile. If I could just be president on the good days, I don't know, I'd mind. But every day for a year, that ain't my choice." Then some of the others said they didn't want to be president either, and Alice withdrew when she found she'd have to make speeches, because she said, I could never stand up in front of an audience, never. Finally, the choice was narrowed down to Jinx, Robert, Mrs. Wiggins, Eenie, and Ferdinand. And after some argument, Freddy said, "As far as doing a good job goes, I don't think it makes any difference. Any of you would do a good job. But my choice would be Mrs. Wiggins. She's got the presence for it. She's the biggest of us all, and that's very important. And she's a good mixer. And she's got common sense. Also, she's had some practice in public speaking in those travel talks she used to give. I think we should all get behind Mrs. Wiggins." "Well, now, Freddie," said Mrs. Wiggins with a troubled look on her broad face, "I don't agree with you. A cow ain't built for public life, and that's a fact. A cow's place is in the home. Now, I think—" But Freddie interrupted her quickly. He felt pretty sure that the other animals agreed with him, and he didn't want another argument started, which might split them up again. "Nonsense," he said loudly. "You're our candidate. That's our platform, and on it we stand. How about it, animals?" The others, carried away by Freddie's enthusiasm, agreed and shouted down Mrs. Wiggins' objections. "Well," she said at last, "all right, I'll do my best. If you all get behind me, as Freddie says, maybe we'll get somewhere. But," she added with her laugh, "if you shove good and hard, it'll be better. A cow's awfully hard to move." Okay, now we know who their candidate is, and I think it's a good choice. End of chapter 7.